What's up guys, it's your boy Shivs, welcome to the video. This today is an advanced assassination rogue guide specifically for M+. We're going to be looking at the Deathstalker hybrid build, which really does pop off. It's the highest performing build that we've seen so far. Things are subject to change slightly, but what we're going to cover today is more general themes on how to maximize damage, how to make effective decisions in keys, and how to get you to the top of the meter. So we're actually looking really, really strong going into the War Within, and the general consensus is we could even become meta. We'll have to see how things pan out, but we're certainly going to get invited into groups, and we have some really exciting changes as well just around the corner on the PTR, which will come live in around November, that will make us even burstier. So it's a very, very exciting time to be playing Assassination Rogue. I hope this guide helps you out. You can follow along with the series that we're making all about PvP, PvE, Mythic Plus, raiding, and keys. We're going to be doing all content this season, so subscribe if you're into Rogue and follow along for the journey. Okay, step one, how to play Assassination Rogue. So we're going to go through some of the core elements that have been put together in the Rogue Guide on Wowhead. This was published by Whisper, so huge shout out to Whisper. I'm a big fan of his content. We have to honour our forefathers that have walked before us and done a lot of work to put a lot of this content together. I'm just trying to make a video today to help translate this into something that everybody can understand. I also want to answer questions that typically I see in the Rogue Discord channel come up a lot. There's also a lot of common pitfalls that Rogue make. And also, it's just generally a really, really hard spec to play in an AOE situation. So, unfortunately, whilst there is a kind of burst opener that you can follow, it's going to fluctuate depending on the amount of mobs in the pool and also the health pools of those mobs. So, the best way to learn Assassination Rogue is become familiar with those rotations, but you have to really learn how the spec works, what's important, to be able to make effective decisions. So this is why today we're going to look at some of the content that exists, and we're going to kind of translate it, walk you through it, break it down, and I'll demonstrate over on the dummies as well. Assassination is a maintenance build, okay? So it's all about bleeding your targets. The more bleeds you have out, the more energy regeneration you have from a talent called Venomous Wounds, okay? So you regain 8 energy every time Garrote or Rupture, is it Garrote or Grote? I don't know. Grote. Garrote or Rupture deal bleed damage to a poison target. Cool. So we want to be spreading bleeds. Fundamental. That's like first priority. You never ever want to be going into a big burst window without spreading bleeds, because you're just going to reduce the potential damage massively. The idea is you keep energy ticking high, you pop all your cooldowns, you do huge AoE burst, and it just never ends, okay? And the goal really is the sweet spot for the amount of bleeds out for optimal energy regeneration is 7 bleeds. Garrote or Rupture, we want 7 in total across your targets, and then you'll find that you can start to do really, really effective damage without worrying about energy. Okay, so let's have a look at the opening sequences. So we're going to look at Deathstalker, Echoing Reprimand, straight to Bone Strike. I'm not going to spend too long on this because, as I said before, this will completely depend on the mob count and the health pool of the mobs and a number of other factors. So you only need to understand the basics of this, and it will start to make more sense the more you practice. So we want to ambush the priority target. So wherever we want to funnel our damage mainly, we want to get ambush on that so that we get Deathstalker's mark going. We're going to Garrote and then Rupture. Now, depending on how many mobs there are, you may Rupture again. So because we use Serrated Bone Strike, we get some combo points refunded to us on the first time that we spend on Rupture. So if you're pulling 5 mobs, you're going to go Garrote, Rupture, Rupture, and all targets will be ruptured. You would then Garrote again, and all targets would be Garroted, right? If you're pulling 3 mobs, you would just Garrote once and Rupture once. Because we have a talent called Indiscriminate Carnage, right? It automatically applies bleeds for 6 seconds after coming out of stealth to 2 additional nearby targets. So that's the first thing that we need to be aware of, right? I've got 5 targets here, so the opener is going to be ambush, Garrote, Rupture, Rupture, Garrote again, right? And now we see we have bleeds on all targets, okay? That is step 1. If it was 3 targets, it's just Garrote, Rupture. Now, after this, we want to be pressing Crimson Tempest. That part is going to depend on how much health do the mobs have. If they're dying really quick, I don't need to send a massive Crimson Tempest. I could just use a smaller one. Because remember, you don't do extra damage with more combo points on these bleeds. They just last longer. All right. So if I'm building 7 combo points to send into a Crimson Tempest and the mobs are dying instantly, it's a waste of time. So for that part, you need to tune it based on, you have to use common sense a little bit, okay? And you have to think about how long is the mob going to last for. Maximum Crimson Tempest is 14 seconds and the shortest is 6 seconds. All right, so again, we need to be able to make some decisions there about how to effectively manage the combo points. Let's go down a little bit farther. After we've done all the bleeds, we're going to mutilate our main target to apply Caustic Spatter. Okay, so Caustic Spatter is our main cleave ability. Using Mutilate on a target affected by your Rupture and Poison, Deadly Poison causes Caustic Spatter. It will cause 45% of your poison damage dealt to splash onto other nearby enemies, reduced beyond 5 targets. Another important point that I'll mention later on again, in order to apply this, you don't need Garrote on the target, it's just Rupture, right? So if you need to quickly get this up on a mob, it's just Rupture and then Mutilate. And you always need to have Caustic Spatter going. You never want to be pressing Envenom unless the target has, unless you have a Caustic Spatter target. Otherwise, you're just wasting damage, right? Because that could be cleaving. All right, Caustic Spatter's up. We want to get Slice and Dice up. Typically, you don't have to press this too often because it automatically gets refreshed now, which is super nice. So, but you do need to get it going at some point. So keep this up. It's pretty high priority. It's going to help you with energy regeneration and things like that. Echoing Reprimand, just send it on cooldown. Treat it like any builder. So whenever we're building combo points, just Echoing Reprimand, just send it on cooldown. It's a fantastic talent. I wouldn't worry about it too much. And it is going to be changing in November as well. So it's going to become even simpler and more of a passive moving forwards. Fan of Knives is your main builder. So when we're building combo points, we want to be using Fan of Knives. Anything 2+ targets in this build, we use Fan of Knives. It used to be 3, and a lot of rogues think it's 3. It's actually 2 due to some of the new talents that we're taking. The 2+ targets, you want to be pressing Fan of Knives. All right, so we've got all the bleeds up. We've got Slice and Dice going. We have a Caustic Spatter target. Fantastic. Now what? Now you're going into your main AoE burst rotation, which is a fundamentally huge part of the way we play. And you need to commit it to muscle memory, which you will do because it's the same pretty much every single time. So once we're going into cooldowns, it's Deathmark, Kingsbane. Make sure Spatter's up. If it's not, we want to mutilate again to put Spatter up. If it's up, don't worry about it. You skip that step. And we're going to Thistle Tea to boost our energy. The trick here is to don't cap energy. Okay, Thistle Tea gives us extra mastery, but it also gives us 100 energy. So again, use it during the burst when you're at or below 200 energy. Then cast Fan of Knives for builders. Spend on Envenom. I would ignore this personally because it's too situational. Right, and it depends on the pack. It depends on too many other factors. We'll talk about that later on in the video. Okay, and we want to shiv as well. So we have in this build, we only have 1 shiv. Okay, so what that means is we want to shiv for the last 8 seconds of Kingsbane. All right, so now we're going to look at some of the openers visualized for you, and then we'll look at it on the dummies. So, well, let's start with Deathstalker AOE. All right, so this looks pretty complex, right? But don't worry, I promise you it's actually not. It's just there's a lot of variables, like we said earlier, that bloats this image. And essentially, you need to be aware of those decisions. And once you understand them, it becomes really, really easy. So firstly, do we have Deathstalker's Mark? Sorry, this is Darkest Night. All right, so there's a really nice thing now where when you kill a mob that's already affected by your Deathstalker's Mark, then you automatically get the Darkest Night buff, right? And that means that when you envenom with max combo points, you get a guaranteed critical strike. It does 60% additional damage and applies 3 stacks of Deathstalker's Mark to the target. So if you're carrying Darkest Night as a buff, which I have a custom Weakauras to tell me when I do have that, then we don't need to open with Ambush, and instead we can skip that step, go straight into the bleeds. As we said earlier, this depends on how many mobs you've got. So, like I said, 7 is the goal. We want 7 bleeds minimum. Rupture is a priority, always. But so essentially, 5 mobs, it's Garrote, Rupture, Rupture, Garrote. 3 mobs, it's Garrote, Rupture. 10 mobs would be Garrote, Rupture, Rupture, Garrote, Rupture, would be Garrote, Garrote, Rupture, Rupture, Garrote, Garrote, Rupture, probably. Something like that. Maybe a Fan of Knives just to get a slightly bigger duration of the second rupture. So really just looking at the play to your health bars and making sure that we have bleed spread on as many mobs as possible, especially during that 6-second indiscriminate carnage window. Okay, it's just free damage. From there, we are getting Crimson Tempest up on the mobs. All right, we are going to get Slice and Dice going. We're echoing reprimands. Okay, we apply Caustic Spatter, and then we go into our burst. We want to be using a trinket macro for your burst here. So here we have Scarden's Grace, which is the best trinket at the moment for Assassination Rogue. On use trinket, you want to macro with Deathstalker's Mark, okay, and you use that every single time. Any 2-minute trinket, macro that to Deathstalker's Mark. Okay, to be honest, when you use Shiv, I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's optimal to use it in the last 8 seconds, but if you're struggling with that, just send it as soon as you press Deathstalker's Mark, and then we'll go T, Kingsbane, Envenom, and after this point, it's just like we said, maintaining Caustic Spatter, sending as many Envenoms into your target as possible, and just cleaving really, really hard, okay? All right, so let's have a look at all of that in action. So we're going to be using Amplifying Poison with Deadly Poison, Crippling and Numbing Poison, okay? And this is going to be my priority target here. Put a little skull on it. All right, let's go. So Ambush, Garrote, Rupture, Rupture, Garrote. Should be a Crimson Tempest, but I did Slice and Dice. Crimson Tempest, get Caustic Spatter up, pop all my cooldowns. Okay, Echoing Reprimand here. Start hitting massive cleaves. Reapply T just for huge damage. I'm going to use Shiv here in a moment. Just going to put Crimson Tempest back up again. So here, sorry, not Shiv. I'm going to use Vanish to reapply my bleeds as those ruptures are starting to tick out now. So now I'm going to Garrote, Rupture again. Fan of Knives, Rupture, and a Garrote. And then we're just going to make sure Caustic Spatter stays up. So you'll see that the green health bar means that I have Caustic Spatter up. Crimson Tempest is going to reapply that. And now I have another huge... I'm going to actually T just for this huge Envenom. And there we go. And now we've kind of finished our burst. And so now we just want to be maintaining bleed. So I'm going to Crimson Tempest. The ruptures that have yellow squares around them means they're in the pandemic window, which means I can reapply Rupture and benefit from the full duration that was there before. There we go, so I have all my ruptures going, reapply Crimson Tempest here. I've got Caustic Spatter up, Kingsbane is back, so I'm going to send T-Shiv Kingsbane into a massive Envenom. And just keep sending here all the way through. Make sure I keep Caustic Spatter up. And then Kingsbane's coming to an end. So I'm going to reapply Crimson Tempest and some Garrotes and just keep spreading ruptures again, and then it just rinse and repeat. Okay, as I'm reapplying Rupture, if I have a Garrote available, I will press it as well. Okay, so let's go again. Get Caustic Spatter up, full bleeds, and reapply Crimson Tempest. And I would just do this until my cooldowns came back around again. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. So let's talk about some short and sweet information for you. Okay, so common questions, common pitfalls, and things that aren't immediately obvious. Okay, so we've just covered off the general rotation and the AOE opener. So you've already got quite a lot to think about there, and that's going to be most of the spec. But now we're going to talk about some specific things. So when to use Crimson Tempest. So Crimson Tempest does more damage the more enemies are affected by it, increasing by 20% per target. In single target, it's absolutely useless. It's just not worth pressing in single target. You'd be better off pressing Envenom. 2 targets plus, it becomes worth the press. And when I say 2 targets plus, I mean, let's pretend it could be a new pool where there's 2 targets. We want to get Crimson Tempest up. It could be maybe 2 more mobs have joined the pack. We're chain pulling and 2 more mobs have joined that don't have Crimson Tempest. then it would be worth pressing Crimson Tempest outside of your cooldowns. If there's 3+ targets that don't have Crimson Tempest on, then you want to really make sure you get it up ASAP, because it does a lot of damage and it's a high priority ability. So yeah, hopefully that answers that. Don't press it in single target. 2+ target. If you see 2 or more mobs that do not have the buff up, it's worth pressing. Don't get me wrong, it's not as high priority as maintaining the bleeds though that give you energy. Okay, so going back to the why behind everything, Garrote and Rupture gives us energy, and more importantly, Rupture up to 5 stacks gives us 4% agility affected for every target affected. So we want to maintain 5 stacks of Scent of Blood, which we get through making sure 5 targets have Rupture. Once you've achieved 5 targets with Rupture and you have 7 bleeds in total, including your Garrotes out for energy, Crimson Tempest is in the highest priority. What to do when you can't re-stealth between pools? Okay, so this one is tricky. Best thing to do as the tank is grouping the mobs together is to just be putting Rupture on as many targets as possible. Have a think about where your Darkest Night buff is. If there's one active, then you need to make sure that you get your Deathstalker's Mark. So if there's one active, okay, so what I mean by this, I've got Deathstalker's Mark on this target, right? We're chain pulling. I'm at 3 stacks on this Deathstalker's Mark, which means I need to use 3 Envenoms that are 5+ combo points on this target to get the Darkest Night. Now I have the Darkest Night buff, it means I could transfer this to a new priority target with a full combo point Envenom like that. Okay, so as you're pulling, you want to be paying attention to where is my mark, and can I move it to the new priority target that I'm going to cleave off of. And whilst you're doing that, you also want to so let's just say here, like this is a good situation. I'm just kind of make sure I've got Slice and Dice up, and I'm just applying Garrotes and Ruptures, right? So Fan of Knives, Rupture, Fan of Knives. I want to build Ruptures first because it's really important for energy regeneration. So now I have 5 Ruptures out, or now I have 5 Ruptures out. I'm weaving in Garrotes off cooldown, Crimson Tempest as well. Right now, I pick my priority target, send cooldowns, okay? So it's actually not a huge damage loss to not get stealth. Usually it works out about the same, realistically, because you're able to chain, like, you know, you're chaining things. You're actually a really pumpy class, right? You've still got 5 stacks of Rupture up. You can get Crimson Tempest up while we're grouping the mobs together. You can get everything nice and organized. Don't worry about it, all right? It's all about prepping the burst window. Make sure you have a Caustic Spatter target and then just pumping. Alright, so how to do fast AoE on, let's say, packs that have got like no health, okay? So naturally the priorities are going to change here slightly. I'm going in fresh, so I'm going in without Slice and Dice, like a brand new pool. Let's pretend we have 5 mobs here, or maybe it's 10 mobs, 20 mobs, whatever, but they don't have much health, they die quick. Now they die quickly, so I'm not going to be spending as much effort in spreading bleeds. I want to get Caustic Spatter up quicker and Crimson Tempest up quicker, and I want to start envenoming faster. So instead, and this is something that you'll just learn with practice, I'm going to go Ambush, Garrote, Rupture, Crimson Tempest, and then straight into Mutilate, and then Caustic Spatter to apply Caustic Spatter, and then just start envenoming. So I'm going to go Ambush, Garrote, Rupture, Crimson Tempest, Echoing Command, get Crimson Spatter up, and then just maybe T if you want, and just spam Fan of Knives into Venoms. And that's it. As you can see, it's very fast burst. Reapply Crimson Tempest if they're going to live, but if not, just keep sending. And that's how you can do sort of, you know, pretty decent damage without any cooldowns. So it's faster. So you want to be doing that when the mobs are going to die fast. Right, next, when to use Vanish. So kind of like going back to what I said earlier about as we're chain pulling, making sure we have a marked target. Okay, if the marked target is in like Narnia, like round the corner, right? Let's just say like this. We've chain pulled and now I'm over here. My marked target is over there. I can't envenom it, right? So that's where you want to be vanishing in order to apply ambush to get the to move the target. All right. So that's one. That's the. For me, that's one use case for Vanish. So now, when Vanish becomes available, I will vanish, reapply the mark, and carry on. I have Vanish, I'll vanish, and I'll just go into cooldowns, etc. So that's one way to use Vanish. Another way to use Vanish is going to be to reapply bleeds. So it's very, very effective to use it for indiscriminate carnage. You can use it on a really long pull, as I did in my opener earlier, where once the bleeds all, I let the bleeds all drop off on purpose and then reapplied them with Vanish. That's another really good use case for it. The third use case would be subject to tuning. It is in single target, technically, during your Deathstalker's mark. Vanishing to apply approved garrote is a damage buff, but I'd say it's the least priority use of Vanish, and unless you're doing a big tyrannical weak key, you're probably going to get more value using Vanish. You only get one charge every 2 minutes. You're going to get more value saving it for bleeds and using it for ensuring you have the markup. Some of the common pitfalls rogues make are one, like, so we're not playing Subterfuge anymore in this build. Okay, so that means that you only get to use one stealth ability out of stealth. All right, so Garrote and Rupture are going to cleave for 6 seconds after stealth, but you only get to use one stealth ability from stealth. So it has to be ambush if the mark is not up. If you forget to ambush and you press Garrote, you don't have Subterfuge, there's no second chance. If you make that mistake, you'll lose out a lot of damage and you'll end up having quite a few pulls where you don't have any Darkest Night and you don't have any Deathstalker's mark and you're missing out on all your damage. So getting in the habit of ambushing and keeping track of where that mark is really important. Another easy mistake to make is just not keeping track of Caustic Spatter. And that's why it's so important to keep track of it, because you want to be cleaving, otherwise we're just missing out so much damage, right? So that's why here we're making this bar green with our plater profile, and we can see exactly when we have Caustic Spatter and when we don't. It's going to make it a lot easier for us to keep track of that. Now, you have to mutilate every 10 seconds on your priority target to keep this up. You can see the remaining duration here on my plater profile, and you want to be keeping an eye on that, and almost just, yeah, you need to be mentally aware of where that is, because if you send all of your burst and Caustic Spatter's dropped off, you've missed out on a ton of cleave. One thing we haven't spoke about is energy sniping, and this is really big for keys in terms of rebuilding your energy quickly in between packs or during a pull. So if an enemy dies whilst affected by Rupture, you regain energy based on the remaining duration of Rupture, which means sometimes it's really worth rupturing a target that's about to die. I'll try and demonstrate this now on this pack. Okay, so I'm pumping. I have no, and you'll see when he dies, my energy goes to full. And so, hard to demonstrate it when everything dies instantly, but basically, if you're like, I don't know, 100 energy, and there's a mob that's on like 5% health, and you have one combo point, you can rupture it. And as soon as he dies, you'll gain like 80 energy back, maybe 100 energy instantly, depending on how many combo points you spent on the rupture. So that's called energy sniping, and it's really, really big to help you regain energy in between whilst you're chain pulling. Let's talk about add-ons. I use a number of add-ons. I'll post an image of all the add-ons that you see on my screen. However, the ones that I want to talk about are going to be Plater and Weakauras. Everything else is preference, really. Obviously, we're using details to see our damage. I use Mask to get this blackout effect on my buffs and all of my buttons. I use Bartender for key binding and organizing my UI. But the two important add-ons today are going to be Plater and Weakauras. Firstly, yeah, so the main Weakaura we're using, I'll post links down below, is Lux Thos for Rogue. And then what I do is I take out, I've customized it to take out utility spells, and I've also removed a bunch of the dynamic effects that I don't need to know about. Okay, I just think it's really important to remove clutter. There's so much going on in this spec that we don't need like all these flashing buffs if they're not relevant to any decisions you're going to make. Just delete them. So you can, if you don't know how to do that, go into dynamic effects and you can delete any of these. You can also drag and drop things to change the priority, which I believe I did. So personally, I like to arrange things like this so I can see my cooldowns here. This is everything that's related to damage. And then I've got my slice and dice and vanish up top. And then you can see we've got garrote and rupture timers here for our current target, and an echoing reprimand. So in single target, I tend to look here a lot more for the rupture and garrote timers, whereas in AOE, I tend to be looking more at my plater profile to see everything that's going on in the pool. The other thing we have is a nice envenom timer. So if I hit envenom now, you'll see we get the envenom timer there to allow you to know if that's up or not on the current target. And it's also really useful if you want to chain envenoms, which is optimal. I haven't spoke today about single target rotation because it's really not that much different from AoE. And if you understand a lot of the things we covered today, you'll very easily be able to adjust. And also, we haven't touched on energy pooling just because I don't want to make this video too long. But in the next video, or in the very near future, I'll be making a single target raid focused advanced guide, and I'll cover energy pooling in that video. Weakauras, took a couple more Weakauras. So firstly, I have a Darkest Night tracker and a Clear the Witness tracker. So this is my Clear the Witness tracker. Clear the Witnesses. After you apply Deathstalker's Mark, your next Fan of Knives does additional plague damage and generates an additional combo point. When you have this ability, it means that Fan of Knives becomes a priority even in single target over Mutilate as a builder. Okay, so that's why I have a Weakauras for it. Basically, it just means press Fan of Knives as the next builder, which you should be doing in AoE anyway, as long as Caustic Spatter's on the target. But in single target, it's worth tracking because you'll press it in single target, which is why I have that Weakauras. Little caveat, if you're playing Vicious Venoms, you don't press, you ignore it completely. So if you're using a single target raid build and you're using Vicious Venoms, for example, you won't follow that rule. The other one is Darkest Night, and as I mentioned earlier, it's very, very important to know where that buff is at. So once I use the 3 charges, I have my Darkest Night buff up there. That means that I now know, okay, well, we're going to change target perhaps to something that's got more health, and I'm going to get a full combo point in Venom over there, and we'll go on that mob instead. Or, so you want to be paying attention to that. It's really important. So I'll post a link to a very simple Weakauras that will show you when you have this buff, and then you'll know that you can easily reapply. Cool. Cool. Now, Plater. So I am using a combination of a couple of different Plater profiles that I've collected. One would be Quasi's. So Quasi, if you're not already aware of Quasi's content, he creates Plater profiles that are very good for Mythic Plus. It takes a lot of the hard work out of knowing the dungeon. It automatically marks priority targets in blue. It marks important casters in purple, so you know what you should be kicking. So I've taken his profile and applied it to some of the other rogue best practices that we see, as well as made a whole bunch of. So I'll post a link down below. So what I've done is I've blacklisted any buffs that just aren't important to us. All the poisons, things like Bone Spike, things like Iron Wire, Mutilated Flesh, whatever, Fatal Intent. If you don't blacklist those buffs, your UI is going to be crazy. You'll see about 20 different buffs, debuffs on each target. You won't be able to track what's going on. The other thing I've done is I've made Deathstalker's Mark a special buff, which is why it sits to the side like that of my target. It makes it really easy to keep track of. Another thing I've done is I've applied a few scripts and mods. So one of them will make the bar green, the health bar green for my Caustic Spatter target, which makes it easier to keep track of who I should be cleaving off of and when I need to refresh. And then for Rupture and Garrote, we have a Pandemic Glow. So that means that Pandemic means that when you can reapply a bleed, and it will extend the duration. I think it's like 10% of the initial timer. Now, I did actually It doesn't work so well for Garrote. So I apologise for that. But the main thing is it's Rupture, right? Because Rupture, five stacks of Rupture gives you 20% agility. So you can see when you can reapply these Ruptures and extend them. So when it gets to 6 seconds or whatever, it glows. And that means now if I press Rupture on that target, it will extend the duration rather than so I don't lose out any damage. Right, so let's take a look at that opener with the UI. I'll point that out. See my Deathstalker's mark. Can see all my bleeds. I'm only really checking Crimson Tempest, Rupture, and everything else. Slice and dice, go into a burst window here. Used Vanish to reapply bleeds. Keep bumping. Cool. There we go, nearly 3 million DPS. Rupture, see Caustic Spatter dropped off there, it's not green, so I reapply. I did one Garrote refresh manually this entire time so far. The rest was Vanish, or I just let it drop off. I'm going to start weaving in a couple of Garrotes. Making sure I'm reapplying my Ruptures here. Weave in a Garrote, Caustic Spatter, Crimson Tempest, one more Rupture over there, and then we'll go into normal bursts. One more Garrote. Okay, and then we're back into my burst window here, 1 minute. Kingsbane's back. That's what it looks like. Quick macro check as well. The macros I use are... I have a main AOE burst, which used a lot in raids. This is using my Addons Grace and my Tempered Potion and my Death Mark all together. It's exactly what you want to be doing on a big pool. I then have my general non-potion Death Mark, which is just Addons Grace and Death Mark. And then I have a Kingsbane macro, which is Berserking and Kingsbane together. And then I do use a mouse over Rupture macro, which looks like this. More than welcome to copy that one if you find that useful as well. And they are essentially all the macros that I use. I also have a mouse over Kick macro, as I find it really easy, useful for making sure that I get the important kicks without having to tab target. Okay, so how to sim yourself. So firstly, you're going to want to download an add-on called Simulation Craft. If you don't already have CurseForge, download CurseForge. That's a great window client for installing and maintaining add-ons. Type in Simulation Craft, grab that. You then have now have SimC. The next thing to do is go into the game, type /SimC. That's going to take a copy of all of your builds, talents, gear, etc. And you're going to take that and you're going to go over to raid bots. And then from here, there's lots of different things you can sim. You can sim stats. Now, the benefit of simming stats is, it's gonna. There is no better way to know what stats you need than simming, right? It can change after every single piece of gear. It also changes depending on the content you're doing, what trinkets you're using, what talents you're using. Lots of different variables, which is why you need to sim. Typically, you'll be simming either patchwork in 5 minutes if you're doing single target raiding, or maybe dungeon slice. Dungeon slice gives you a kind of a 6-minute route in a dungeon. I think it's like one boss fight and a couple of packs, so it gives you like takes a kind of a segment of a dungeon. To begin with, that's all you need to know. Click generate stat weights, and it's going to have a think. Right, if you're not a premium member, you go into a queue. It'll take a couple of minutes. Leave it running in the background, and then you'll get your results. Whilst that's thinking, I'll show you something else you can sim, which is a gear check. So if you want to see how much extra DPS you can get from a specific trinket, you can go to gear, and then you can type in the name of that trinket. So let's just see how much DPS I would gain if I had like a fully upgraded Addons Grace. Cool, so those sims should be done now. So 18,000 would be the exact DPS gain for Skardin's Grace. Very, very nice. And it was upgraded to max item level. And then sims, yeah, the stats sim still running, but you get the idea. This will show you the best stats based on your build, your talents, your gear, everything else, your item level. So you always want to be simming. Yeah, hopefully that was useful. All right, guys, we're going to end the video there. So thank you for watching all the way through, if you're still with us. Big shout out to anyone that's been involved in theory crafting, any of the latest rogue builds, rotations, etc. Anyone that's been putting together content, huge shout out. I hope this guide was helpful. If you did find it useful, please drop a like, comment any questions that you may still have, and hit subscribe. I'm going to be making a single target raid rogue guide very shortly, as well as a whole bunch of PvP content in the War Within. So subscribe if you want to follow along the journey, and I'll see you in the next video.